Hello beautiful souls and welcome back to my channel Soul Journey. My name is Beck and today I wanted to make a video inspired by my friend Racine, or you may know her as Owl Moon 513. She recently did a video on her favorite shadow work decks and I felt like this was a cool idea. Not only because we're coming into winter and that, we've been in that fall time, we're coming into winter, we're coming into a going inward time. Just a little bit. But I've personally been doing a lot of shadow work. I know a lot of people are really diving into this. And so I thought I would, talk about some of my favorite decks and when it comes to shadow work. Now, some of these I've used a little bit, some of these I've used a lot, but these are all decks that I suggest if you are working on shadow work and really want to dive into becoming more connected with your inner world of the shadow. These decks are really powerful. So let's get into it. Also, if you want to see other decks for shadow work, I highly recommend checking out her video. The link to that is in the description as well, or you can go to Owl Moon 513, her channel. It's in the recent videos. It should be like my favorite shadow work decks or something like that. Anyway, so I don't have these in any particular order, but we're just gonna get into it. So a couple of these were on her list, a couple of them are not, but these are the ones that I have found to be really powerful in my personal practice over the years, and just in general. So the first one is the Les Vampires deck by Lucy Cavendish and Jasmine Beckett Griffith. This is an Oracle deck. I have Oracle and Tarot decks here, and don't mind this. I'm going through all of my clothes, so yay! So this is an Oracle deck. Whoa, what is happening? That's the wrong book in there. Did I swap these books? I did. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Okay, I'm like, what is happening? Okay. So this is an Oracle deck. I have used this in the past, but I haven't used it a lot recently. It comes with this pretty full book. And I will say, if you're not a huge fan of the Jasmine Beckett Griffith look, you may not like this deck, but the book is really interesting. So I've got this here. What I find with a lot of these cards is they really are, they don't beat around the bush. Like this one's Seduction. So basically they go into, these shadow aspects and why they're coming up, and, seeing them is not necessarily a bad thing, but just kind of like an aspect of Burned by the Sun. And I actually think I want to start using this deck more. The art is really cool. They also have these not only like main keywords, but like under keywords. And as you can see, like in the pictures, you can definitely journal with these. Call for help, reach out, need for backup, admit your needs. So I feel like this is kind of a deck that has to do with, going to the places that we may not want to look at. The past, a prison. Refusal to let go. So you can kind of see how that works. And I definitely want to use this deck more, but this is really good for the fall time, the winter time, getting into that shadow piece. I also suggest with shadow work that do journaling. Something Racine mentioned, and I highly agree with it, is shadow work isn't just about pulling a card. It's about sitting with the feeling. It's about, exploring your beliefs around that thing. It's about journaling. It's about, sitting with with these aspects of ourselves that we may not feel are, you know, beautiful from the outside, and, you know, but pieces of us that are either wounded or damaged. And sometimes a deck like this can be really helpful in sorting those out, because as we know, the shadow is shadow because we've rejected it. And so oftentimes we may not even identify with it before it comes up. And so that can be really good too, to have a deck that's a little more hard hitting, because you know, sometimes a card will come up and be like, oh, that's not me. But like, just like any deck or, you know, card pull, what comes up is a reflection of you. So it's important to, you know, dive into that. So this next one, I'm already pulling it out here, is the Divine Circus Oracle by Alana Fairchild. Now this book is amazing. It is really, really on point. Let me know, guys, if you also want me to do a video on my current decks that I'm using too, because I'm going to be switching over my altar soon and getting into a very different energy. So let me know if that interests you. So this, it's funny. My soul sister looks like identical to this, which is funny. This deck is really interesting because I'm not a huge fan of the whole circus thing, but I really like it in the sense for shadow work, because it does bring up this like dark, creepy aspect. You know, the circus is, you know, where all the misfits went. It's where all the people that were misunderstood. And these cards are really, really on point. I remember not really wanting this deck because I don't really resonate with the whole circus thing. But when I worked with the book, I was so blown away with how on point it was. And so I suggest, you know, with this, you know, do some journaling with the art. If the art makes you uncomfortable, you know, look at why. But I just highly recommend this deck, even not for shadow work. It's a pretty wild deck. I believe that the art was done by a couple different people, if I remember correctly. So, and this is just one of those decks that really is like pretty straightforward. And I haven't actually used this deck in a little while, but every time I use it, I'm kind of blown away by its clarity. And so that can be really helpful with shadow work, because the whole point of shadow work is that there isn't a lot of clarity. And so these decks can be really helpful. All right, this next deck is a tarot deck. This is called the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. I actually don't have the box. It was very large, and when I came home from Australia, I didn't take it home with me. So this tarot deck is, I find, good for shadow work, specifically because the images are very moody. They really kind of bring up a lot of feeling in them. And this is a really good deck to do like with journaling and really getting into the picture, you know, feeling out. Because like our shadows usually come up through our feelings, right? And they're not usually easily put into words. And so oftentimes it's a feeling that comes up. And so I like using decks for shadow work that really evoke a feeling and really bringing kind of this, like, if it's a little uncomfortable, and then diving into why it makes me uncomfortable, right? There's also something very like Halloween-y about this deck. I really like that image a lot. I really like this too, just in the shadow sense. The Two of Cups is like the integrating the light with the dark, becoming a team. The Ten of Swords in here, I really, really like. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, like Knight of Swords. It's super dark. Nine of Swords. So, you know, shadow work is really about, you know, shadow work decks are really about what like invokes a feeling within you, what's going to really help you, you know, come to terms with where you're at within yourself. Where is it? And some of these, you know, some of these are really beautiful. Like some of these are very like powerful. That's the Star. Oh, look. The Devil. Oh, Eight of Swords is really powerful. And again, I need to work with more of these decks because, like, I'm really diving in and I want to be more present with this shadow work stuff. And these are definitely, oh, well, that's the Death card. That's awesome. So this gives you an idea. I can't find the one I was looking for. Oh, here, Ten of Swords. So, you know, it's really about what feels good to you. And there are different types of shadow work cards. You know, some are, you know, exploring, you know, your mortality. Some are working with inner child stuff. All right, so the next deck here is the Bonfire Tarot, which was for a while my, like, main reading deck, which is really cool. I love this deck a lot. And what I like about this deck is there is kind of a, it definitely is very clear, but the images are very, how would I want to put it? There's a little bit of a creepiness factor. I like this because it really invokes specific feelings. But for me, this was really just about the fact that I've had some really amazing shadow work readings with this. There was one where I had, I think it was either the Lovers or the Two of Cups. And it just brought in some really profound information that I wouldn't have necessarily gotten from that card. Let's see if I can find it. The woman's hair is like wrapped around the guy's neck, and it's actually really lovely. But when coming at it from a shadow work perspective, it really brought in a whole other level of, like, you know, constricting or being resistant or being controlling. And so I feel like this deck, and also there's a lot of symbology in here. So there's just like a really good opportunity to kind of dive into these little bit of like darker spaces within ourselves. And again, it's all personal. Like what's good for one person with shadowed, you know, shadow might not be good for someone else. Let's see if I can find that one. Oh, it's right here. Yeah, it is Two of Cups. So I really like this one. And it's also just really clear when it comes in. And here's the deal. Any deck can be a shadow work deck if that's your intention. But some decks just really bring in a little bit more clarity. All right, so that's the Bonfire Tarot. It's really hard. I wish I could have all of my decks out, but I just have so many. All right, let's see. What's next? Okay. The next deck is the Alice Tarot by Baba Studios. This is my most expensive deck, and I'm so sad. So my mother got me this deck when I was going to Australia. Like, she gave it to me as a going away present. And so this deck has, you know, been traveling. And so it like ripped here, and I'm so sad, but this is one of the more expensive decks I have, but the art is unbelievably beautiful. And you might not think of this as a shadow work deck necessarily, but what I like about this deck is the images are very like feeling. Like it's almost like you can feel what it was like to be there. And for me, that can be really good for bringing up the feelings within shadow work. There's also a bit of like an inner child aspect, but I really feel like this is really about the psyche. I don't know. This just, it's almost hard to explain this one. It just gives me like, for me, it just dives into the feelings very easily. And for those of you who've watched the movies, this is more based on the book. So there might be some images. Yeah, this like, that's so great. It's the Eight of Swords. There might be some images in this that just, you know, like you didn't see the movies or whatever. But some of these just really... These also would be good for journaling. And I wouldn't say these are inherently dark, right? But they definitely invoke a feeling, and feelings are how we get into our shadow. They're how we feel out our wounds. So look at how these images make you feel. If they make you uncomfortable, why? Do journaling on it. And all of these decks are just great in general. Really, look at that shimmer. Can you see it? I can't really see that. It's a beautiful deck in general, but it's got very clear messaging. So again, if you step into it with the shadow, it's going to give you some really good messages. I wish this box wasn't broken. All right, the next deck is the, oh my god, Marielle Tarot. And now I feel like this one specifically is a deck that's used for inner child work. It can really have some very provocative images. So it's one of those things, and Racine touched on this, if like you're feeling unsafe and your inner child can't be in a safe space while you work with this deck, it might really, cause you to have some intense feelings. And I do recommend doing journaling with this. The only thing I don't like about this deck is there's no words on it, so they just have like these like symbols and the number. But yeah, like I can just feel this deck just like. So yeah, if you want to do inner child work, which let's be real, all shadow work is inner child work, but this kind of brings it like to the forefront. I want to use all these decks. I pulled these out. I feel like this also with shadow work is some of the images may not be like the typical meanings for tarot, but I feel like they really could represent other things. So definitely go intuitively with this deck as well. And, just for those of you who, are getting into tarot, like, tarot is not only about learning the cards, it's about the intention with each reading. Are you going to read it intuitively? Are you going to read it more based on what you know about the cards? Is this a relationship spread? Is this a, shadow work spread? Your intention, because cards work vibrationally, is huge when it comes to how the cards lay out. So it's very important to have clarity on how you want to come at the reading, because you're going to read it very differently, and the cards are going to come out very differently depending on your frequency that you are emitting and that they're responding to. So, gotta work with all these decks. All right, the next deck is a deck you guys have been seeing me use in my readings. This is the Blind Spot Oracle by Teal Swan. I have to say, this is probably my current favorite shadow work deck. Again, this deck, as far as I know, is not available on her website yet. I got this when I went to her synchronicity workshop in New York. This deck is interesting. Well, I'll just get into it. These are different sigils that she channeled for different shadow aspects. And the idea of this deck is that it's called the Blind Spot Oracle. So the sigil comes up as a reflection of whatever you're not seeing in a certain situation. If you do want to see more on this deck, I did just post a few weeks ago a whole like deep dive into it. The only thing I don't really like about it is this like paper. Like I would have been fine if it was just like white and had like the black behind it. And then the other thing is she doesn't have keywords on here. So other than that, but it does make you go into the book, which is good. The book is very clear, and oftentimes when you pull a card, you're like, damn, that like, oh, obviously. So this is really, really good. She goes into, you know, if you've pulled this card, what it means. Here's some examples. Maybe here's a different frequency you want to work with. And some of these are the frequency of the actual blind spot, and some of them are ones that like pull you out of the blind spot so you can see it better. I highly recommend this deck. I mean, it's probably one of my favorite shadow work decks I've ever worked with. What is happening there? Okay. And I really like it a lot. And the book is amazing. So I definitely suggest getting on her mailing list. They always have really cool stuff going up there. I'm not sponsored, obviously, but I highly recommend it. She's got a lot of cool stuff on there, but I'm sure she's going to post when it is officially on the site. So if you really like this deck, I highly recommend getting on her mailing list because I'm sure she'll announce it. All right, so we have a couple more decks here. The next one is the Tarot of Vampires deck. And this deck I've worked with off and on. It's got a very intense imagery, so it's great for shadow. It's very good at provoking uncomfortableness. But what I really like about this deck is when you really dive into it, it gives really, really clear messages. And some of my most like powerful like expansion moments were with this deck. And I just really, really like it. And again, your shadow journey is going to be about your relationship with your decks, your relationship with your journaling, your relationship with whatever you do shadow work with. So, you know, you've got to create your journey. But this deck definitely holds some really cool space for that. And it's interesting because it's not even specifically about the images for me. I just feel like this deck speaks very clearly. If you have very clear positions for your cards, if you know where, you know, you're coming from with the intention, this deck will give you clarity. But if you don't like vampires, or you don't like bloody Halloween, dark stuff, it's not for you. There are definitely other shadow work decks that are lighter, as you've seen, that are still just as healing. But this is a really good one, and I think a lot of people really go to this one because it just takes you to a different space, and you can do a lot with these images if they resonate with you. I really like the aces in this deck. Let me see if I can find one. 3 of Grails. Some of these are just beautiful. Oh my god, the sun. Love that. 10 of Swords. Love that. Let's see if I can find one of... oh, this is one of my favorite cards. This is actually one that I really did a lot of work with, and it was really powerful. So it's really cool. All right, the next deck is the Marielle Tarot, and I got this the day after I came home from Australia. I just really felt like I needed it for a new chapter. This deck is interesting because it's definitely not based on any of the Rider-Waite. If anything, it's based more closely to the Thoth Tarot. But, oh, I love that. But this deck is really powerful. The imagery is really powerful, and I find I read this best totally intuitively. The book that comes with it is powerful. The artist, you know, she created her own deck, her own meanings. She also has in there the traditional meaning. But this deck, I feel, especially with shadow work, is best read intuitively. This deck often comes up for me in the fall. It's around the time I actually purchased it. But this is a great fall winter deck, in my opinion. There's nudity in there. Sorry. Not sorry. It is a natural thing. And this deck is just absolutely gorgeous. And if you do want to work with the book, it's really powerful. But I will say, if you're used to the normal tarot, like I said, this is very different. So it's almost like going into like a whole other type of card reading. Like not oracle, not tarot. It's just its own thing. But it comes up and it does some really amazing readings, and intuitively for journey work and journaling, it's spot on. All right, and then the last two decks kind of go together. Well, they do go together. It's Soul Cards 1 and Soul Cards 2. Soul Cards 1 and Soul Cards 2. I find that Soul Cards 1 is a little darker, so I find it's really good for shadow work. But what I like about these decks is these are completely intuitive because there is no book. There are no keywords. This is purely intuitive. So, you know, for shadow work, you know, you got to really be centered in yourself. You've really got, and it's not that you have to be centered in yourself. It's that you have to trust yourself with what comes up for you. And what's really cool is different things are going to come up depending, you know, on the reading. And because there is no guidebook, it's all about the personal journey. So this is Soul Cards 1. I personally like Soul Cards 2 better, just personally. I really like the art. But they're both lovely, and you can actually mix them together. They just have different color backings, but they're the same size. The backings are the same, just different colors. And I highly recommend both of these decks. I found these decks through Avalon Spiritual Odyssey, Avalon Cameron on YouTube. And this is Soul Cards 2. I feel like there's more color in this one. But this is good, you know, for anything. But I feel like it's really, it gets into the psyche because you kind of have to. You kind of have to dig into, like, what does this mean to me? And because of that, it can be a really good gateway into something deeper. It's also easy if you're not super, like, trusting in yourself to kind of be a little shallow about it. So I do recommend, you know, it's like, oh, it just means blah, blah, blah. So I do recommend journaling with this, or even coming back to it later and kind of like re-looking at it and exploring it on however many levels feels good. All right, so those, why is that all scratched up? What is that? Oh, this must have been near a cat. Crazy. Okay. So those are my current shadow work decks that I really feel are awesome. Like I said, some of these I've worked with more than others. All of them are magic. And I'm just really feeling a draw to work with most, if not all of these right now. So again, if you're interested in seeing my current decks, once I like switch over my altar, definitely let me know. I will do a little dive into that. If you would like a personal reading with me, you can head down to my Etsy shop where I do readings and have other yummy good stuff. Or if you'd like to follow me on my other social media, the links to that are in the description down below. And definitely give this a like if you like this video and you want to see more like it in the future. Stay tuned for Friday or Saturday. I'll be doing the reading for the collective, the weekly reading for the collective. So you can check out my reading style, or you can check out last week's reading and hit the subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this in the future. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. Many blessings. Namaste. Definitely don't forget to ask any questions you have about the decks too. Got off topic. Okay, yeah, comment down below if you have any questions about the decks, or if you have any personal shadow decks that you really enjoy. All right, thank you guys. Much love. Blessings. Don't forget, it's all about the soul journey. Bye.